This is Twig Recipes, making Drupal 8 render the markup that you want. The slides are already available, so you can go to that URL and follow me. And they are also in the session description. Before I start, feel free to interrupt me anytime if you have any questions, and we can also ask questions at the end. My name is Mauricio Dinarte. You can find me as Dinarcon pretty much everywhere in the internet. That is my email and my Drupal.org username too. I am from Nicaragua. We have a lot of volcanoes and lakes and earthquakes and eruptions and things like that. Pretty extreme. So if you want extreme vacation, you can go to Nicaragua. I work for a company called Agaric based in Boston. I work remotely from Nicaragua, but we have offices in Boston and soon in Minneapolis too. So we're going to start. So the tag is like very basic at the beginning, and then we go to the recipes themselves. But before the recipes, we need to have some theory before. So we're talking about making Drupal 8 render markup. So the markup is controlled by the themes. The themes are the ones who control the appearance of your website. And as such, they define the layout, the color scheme, the fonts to be used, and some even might provide user interactions like slideshows and things like that. As we heard in the talk before, slideshows are not accessible, or most of them, so try to avoid them if possible, but if needed, a theme might provide those for you. A theme outputs HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and it is possible through templates. Templates are used to separate the presentation from the business logic. Before Drupal 8, the templating engine used was PHP template, so you had PHP at your disposal, and if you wanted, you can drop your database from your theme, which was a really bad idea. And it continues to be a really bad idea. So in Drupal 8 now we have Twig, and it's possible, but really hard to do it. And if you do it, it's because you literally wrote the code to wipe out your database from the theme, which I doubt anyone will do. In the theme, in the template, you are only supposed to render variables and some logic, like if this is true, then I do this, or for a list of some items, I want to do the following. But it is mostly like printing variables and some control structures that we're going to see later. The template itself consists of HTML markup with placeholders that are going to be replaced with dynamic content coming from the backend. And CSS, JavaScript, and other assets as images can be added as needed. So in Drupal, we have a lot of templates, and usually they encapsulate one another. So we have a general HTML template that defines the header, the footer of the page. Then we have templates for the different regions that your theme is going to provide, and you keep going down to the level of blocks, views, notes, fields, and so on. One thing important to note is that one particular piece of content in your website can actually be the result of many templates acting as acting one on top of the other. For example, if you have when you install Drupal 8 out of the box, you get like a front page, and you get like the articles that are promoted to the front page. You see them, and with a line says submitted by someone. So that someone, in this case, is a node property, but in theory, it could also be a field. So that particular piece of information can be a field template that is printed inside a node template, that is printed inside a view template, that is printed inside a block template, and it's inside a theme region template, and so on. So in Drupal, it is important to know what you're dealing with in order to modify the markup as you desire. And we're going to look at some examples of how to find out what I am dealing with. This is an example. This is the HTML template. All the templates in Drupal 8 ends with .html.twig, and they are placed in a templates folder within your theme. In this case, HTML is repeated twice because the first part is the name of the template itself. This is the outermost template, and within this one, you print the page template. The page template in particular has a page variable, and if you see there, like page.header, page.primary menu, secondary menu, and so on, those are the regions provided by your theme. So, this will depend on the theme that you're using, but that page template is the one responsible for printing the regions. When you print, like, let's say, page.header, then that will call another template, which is the region template. This one is very simple. It only checks if there is content in that particular region, and if there is any, it prints it. Then within the region, you can have many blocks, for example. So, one of those blocks will use the block template, and it will check if it has a label or if it has content, and it prints that markup. Let's say that block encapsulates a node, so you get the node template. And this is the content of the node template in Bartik, if I'm not mistaken. So as you can see, many layers of templates, and in a single page, it can be the result of over 100 templates working together to render the markup that is being outputted at that moment. Now a little bit about Twig. Twig is the templating engine for Drupal 8. It replaced PHP template, and it is developed by the same people who developed Symfony, which is also integrated in Drupal. You can find more information in those links. This is a Twig template, and this is like a generic one. There is nothing Drupal specific in this example. So as you can see, you have HTML markup, and then you have you identify the Twig syntax by curly braces and percent signs and two curly braces in a row. So those are the dynamics parts, and then you have your static content around that. So some concepts about Twig. If you want to print something, like print a variable, you use two curly braces in a row and put the variable name inside. In Twig, there is something called dot notation. So for example, if you have the node object and you want to print the bundle, which is what we call in Drupal the content type, you can say node.bundle, and that will print the content type. The dot notation is the one that is used the most, but there are two alternatives. One is using square brackets, and the other one is using the attribute function. The line 1 through 3 in this example, they are all equivalent. And why would you use one of the alternatives to the dot notation? If you are working with render arrays, which in Drupal is very common, you cannot have after a dot a pound sign. So if you object or array has a property that starts with a pound sign, and you need to print that or evaluate that, you need to use the square bracket notation. Or, for example, if for some reason, this is not done in Drupal, but if for some reason your variable name contains a dash in the middle, Twig will interpret that as a math operation, so it will break. In that case, you can use the attribute function. So you put attribute, the name of the variable, and then the name of the attribute that you want to print. The dot notation is the one that is used the most because it will abstract many concepts from you. So it is not the job or the responsibility of the themer to know the underlying data structure. In the backend we have render arrays. In the backend we have objects. We have scalar values like a string or a number. So we don't need the themer to know that information, and it is better if they don't. I mean, their job is to focus on the markup itself. So the dot notation is going to do all of these checks for you, and the first one that it matches, then it returns that value. So first it will check if what what is after the dot is a property in an array. Excuse me, it's a key in an array. The second check is if it is a property in an object, or if it is a function in an object. And if it is a function, it will call the function, and the return value of the function is what's going to be printed. Then you get a get method, again in an object, is method, again in the object, and for Drupal 8 in particular, all of the others are generic for Twig, but in Drupal 8 we also make an extra check. Is this that I am pointing to a render array? And if it is a render array, it internally calls the render function, and you get that output. If none of those is true, then we return null. Another thing in Drupal, in Twig, that we can do is setting variables. So you can set a variable and use it later in your template, for example, for printing purposes or for evaluation purposes. You can say if the variable that I set has a specific value, then I do something, or you can simply say I want to print this variable with the set values that I gave it. How does it work? There you can you use the keyword set, the name of the variable equals, and then the value. The value can be a scalar, let's say a string or a number. It can be an array, as in this example, or it can be an object, in which case you use brackets. One thing to note here is that you can use anything that Twig puts at your disposal to create in this case, classes, or to set the variables that you want. So for example, in line 3, we have a node, so that's a string. In line 4, we have a concatenation of some string plus the bundle of the node. The pipe, we're going to talk about that later, but that is a filter. So because Drupal allows users to add bundles with any name, and those names do not necessarily match CSS valid classes, so the clean class filter will make sure that anything that the user created is actually a valid CSS class. We can also add things to the array conditionally. For example, we are checking if the node is promoted. If yes, add the node promoted class. Otherwise, do not add that class. And the same with it's sticky. We can also check the negative of a condition. So if the node is not published, add that class. And if we have a view mode established, add a view mode via concatenation. And once we have the class, we can, as I said before, print it or do any other operation that we want with that class or with that variable. So filters. Filters allows you to modify some variable that you're working with or some values that you're working with, and usually they are applied with a pipe and then the name of the filter. So you have your variable or your string, for example, then a pipe and the name of the filter. In line 1 and 2, we have a variable that is going to be uppercase, the text that it contains. In line 2, we have just a regular string, and it's going to be also uppercase. It is also possible to apply a filter using the filter tag, which is the syntax that we can see from in line 5 to 7. Filters can be chained. So for example, in line 10, we have a variable called name, and we apply the strip tags filter, and to the result of that, we apply the upper filter to make things uppercase. And also, some filters can receive parameters. For example, in line 13, we have a modules variable, which is an array, and we apply the safe join filter, which what that does is what you pass as a parameter, it is going to be the separator between the values of the modules array. This tag doesn't focus on security, but safe join is specifically for Drupal. Twig has a join filter without the safe word, but for security purposes in Drupal, this is the recommended way to do it. Functions. We call a function by the name, and then we pass parameters as needed. So we have a random function to generate random commands, a range function to generate an array of numbers. In the attach library function, it is specific to Drupal, and what this does is that in the page where this is being called, you are going to attach a library in your theme. So actually, this won't render anything directly in that section of the template, but instead, you can add CSS or JavaScript libraries to the, let's say, to the node if you are using this code in a node template. Now we have test too. A test is a check, so you can say if this condition is true, I want to do the following. We can check, if a variable is not empty, or is a variable is, let's say it's before or invisible in this case. If a variable has a specific value and a second variable is not empty, in line number 9 we have if some number is odd. Technically speaking, the only filter here is the word odd. The word is, the word not, the word in, those are operators. But in practice, usually they work together. Now we have filters, functions, and tests. How do I know when to use which one? So this is a summary. For a filter and a test to work, you need an expression preceding it. An expression can be a variable, for example, or a string, or a math operation, but you need something before it in order to use it. So for filters and for tests, you need that before. All of them can receive arguments. Most of them have default values for those arguments, so you can use them without adding anything. And this is the most important difference, is what is returned by these things. So the filter is used specifically to modify something that you already provide. So let's say you have a string, you apply the upper filter, then what is returned is also a string, only that it is now modified based on the filter that you applied. A function can return like the same type of variable that you gave it, but also like in the attach library example, it cannot print anything right away, but instead modify how the page is being built. And in the case of tests, they only return true or false. So usually those are used in if statements. We now have control structures. These are examples from core. We have a for control structure and an if control structure. So a breadcrumb is an array, and we want to iterate over the elements in that array. So we say for item in breadcrumb, and then we will create a loop, and in that loop we will have at our disposal a variable called item. And that variable can actually be either an array or an object in itself. So we can use the dot notation to inspect that variable and take decisions of what we're going to print based on that. In this example, we check if this is DrupalCorn, this is the breadcrumb. So usually you have everything as a link, and the last element of the breadcrumb is the page that you are actually at the moment, and that is not a link. So we check, does this element contains a URL? If it is the case, print a URL tag, an A tag. Otherwise, just print the text. This is another example from core. This is what we use for printing status messages. So we have an array called messages that contains all the messages for a page, and we check the length. We apply the length filter, and we check the length. If that is more than one, that means if there is at least one message to print, then we print something. Otherwise, we don't do anything. One important thing about Twig is that it tries to abstract as many concepts as possible. So the length filter will work even if you pass a string, in which case it will return the number of characters in that string. But if you pass an array, it will return the number of elements in the array. So the same filter will work no matter the data type that you pass to it. And again, we're trying. The themer doesn't need to know the underlying data structure. They only care about is this empty or not, or what is the length of it. Again, then we print the messages, and in this particular case, if there is more than one element, more than one message, we print them in a UL, like a list. Otherwise, we just print the message without any markup surrounding it. Now, how do we override the Drupal markup? Again, anything that is outputted by Drupal comes from a template. One of the many themes that comes with core, called stable, has 146 templates. So trying to find the right one to modify sometimes is tricky. But there are a couple of things that we can do to help. The most common one is enabling theme debug. So in your website, you will have a file called services.yml, and if you modify that file, you will find a twig.config option, and you change debug to true and auto reload to true. The instructions are in those links, and when you do that and clear your cache, you will get theme suggestion. We're going to see it next. So let's have an example. This is a Drupal 8 out of the box with a node created. Let's say that I want to change the date where it says submitted by admin on Thursday, and it has a date with a time. Let's say that I don't want to print that format, that I want to use a different format. How do I do that? So now that I enable theme debug, I will get this. When I inspect the source code of that page, I'm going to see comments, and those comments are going to give me a clue of what can I do to modify it. For one, it says the theme hook that is being used. Later, we are going to learn about passing variables from the backend to the frontend, and when we need to do that, we need to know the theme hook that is being used. We also get a list of file name suggestions. So let's say that we want to override the node, but only for a specific content type. Then the way that it works is it lists all the possible options that could be used, and with an X, it marks the one that is actually being used in this particular case. So let's say that you have 3 content types in your website, and you want to modify only one of them. So you can, in this case, the article node type. So you can have a template for node that will apply for everything, and a template called node-article.html.twig, and that is going to be used only when printing nodes of the article content type. So those are the theme suggestions, and that is how you can override the default markup. Drupal will provide suggestions for the content type and the view mode that is being used, and you can add more as needed. And the last comment is the specific template that is being used to render the markup. One thing to note here is that in the screenshot, I only have the suggestion for the node template, but again, when you see the whole page, you will see suggestion for every level, like for the nodes, for the fields, or if you go upward, for the blogs, for the views, for the page, and so on. So this is one of the many comments that you will get in one specific page. Another thing to note is that views templates do not get all the theme suggestions that are available. A view in particular can use up to 5 templates. So you have like a wrapper for the whole view, then you have the row styles, then you have the specific fields that are printing in the view. So many templates can be part of the output of a view, and when views in particular, at least as of now, doesn't shows you in these comments all the theme suggestions. So in the second link below, you get a list of everything that is provided by views. And even though it is not listed, you can name your template like that and clear the cache, and you will get those suggestions being picked up. Okay, so again, with the example, I want to modify the date format. So, okay, this is the node template. I identify that this is being printed by the node template. Then in the node template, in Drupal comes by default with the theme called Bartik, so that is the path. And in line 94 of that template, I get this, trans submitted by author name on date. So this is pretty much what I'm trying to modify. So uh, now that I identify the template that is being used, how do I change that? What I have to do is first I have to inspect the template to see if there is any useful information. I say that I want to change the format of the date. And in line 10, I get this node dot created time will return the node creation timestamp. So somehow I need to use this to modify the date format. Once I identify what I need to use, then I copy the template and put it in my theme. Again, you can name your theme whatever you want. In that folder, you create a templates folder, and then you paste what you copied. After you paste what you copy, you make any modification that you want, and then reveal caches. One thing important about this particular example, the author name and the date variables that are within trans are HTML strings already pre-processed in the backend. It is a best practice to never pass HTML from the backend to the frontend. Instead, you pass render arrays because that will allow other developers, for example, using a module or a theme, to modify what is being output. But there is a catch that the trans filter only accepts scalars. So if you try to pass a render array there, it won't work. If you try to pass an object, it won't work. It only accepts like strings or numbers. So how to go about and do what I want to do? In line number 4, I am creating a value. I say node created date, created time. I apply the date filter and the format that I want to use. And that value is a scalar, so I can use it in the trans filter. If I didn't do that, it won't work. So in trans, I can only use scalars. I cannot use render arrays or anything. I cannot apply filters. I cannot apply functions, anything like that. It doesn't work. So what? Yes.
So you're saying you couldn't put the node data time thing down
Inside.
in place of custom date?
Yeah. No,
It
you.
has to be separate.
Yeah. I mean, in theory you can, but you don't get the result that you expect. If you do that, what you will get is a number. So Drupal, what it's going to do is, as the first thing that returns something, it is being output. So in this case, now.created time is the timestamp. So those are numbers. It won't apply the date filter to it. So in trans, you can only have scalars. And because we can only have scalars, the way around that is I create a variable, I apply my logic, any modification that I need to do, and then I print that. And how you go about it? So you do that, clear your cache, and it works. Now I have the date in the format that I want. For those paying very close attention, you will have noticed the following. In the comment of the node template, it says node.getCreatingTime and parentheses. But I used, in my example, node.creatingTime. I don't use the word get, and I don't use the word parentheses. Why? I am, using the features that Twig provides, and by default, Twig will make all the checks that I explained the dot notation. So it will automatically find out that there is a get method, and it will call that. Why this might be confusing, but the reason to use it in these ways is because I don't think, again, that it is the responsibility of the themer to know if this is a function, if this is a property, if this is a key in an array. So if I can abstract that from the themer, I will do it. But all of those are equivalent. The Twig will make sure that any of those will work the same. And a warning. I copied the template from Bartik. This is only for demonstration purpose. You are not supposed to make a subtheme from Bartik. You are only supposed to make a subtheme from classy or stable. And there are many reasons for that. We can talk about them later if you want. But again, never make a subtheme from Bartik. Let's go to the recipes themselves. The first one. How can I pass information from Drupal to Twig? So the recipe is as follows. You modify the .theme file. Every theme can have, like if your theme is called pistachio, then you can have within that folder a file called pistachio.theme. You modify that file and implement hook preprocess hook. So how do you implement a hook? The first hook before the word preprocess, that is going to be the name of your theme. And the second one after the preprocess, the one capitalized, that is going to be the theme hook suggestion that you get from theme debug. So when you enable theme debug, it says theme hook node. So if we wanted to modify the node template, it would be pistachio preprocess node. Then you get a variables array and you modify that. That variable array is going to contain a keys, which will become the variables in your template, and the value of those keys is going to what you're going to print. And then you just print the variables. An example, let's say that I want to, I have a node, and in this node, I have two fields, one called cover image and cover title. And I want to make those a background image in my page. So I implement Butaro, in this case is the name of the theme, preprocess, and implement the page hook suggestion. I check if variables node is present, and I've checked if that node in particular is of type page. If that is the case, then I modify the variables array. I add two elements to that array. One is I check the node, I get the field image, and I get view full. That view full, what means is that I am going to get a render array with the configuration from the full view mode. So in my view mode configuration called full, I have all the fields, and Drupal will read that and return a render array with that information, and that is going to be assigned to the cover underscore image, and in the second case to the cover underscore title variables. I go to the next one, and this is how I do it in Twig. Let's pay attention to line number 3 and line number 5. In one, I call the variable directly, and in the other one, I use the render filter. Why do I have to do that? The result of view full is a render array. I want to display this markup only if the variable exists. If the variable don't exist, I don't want to create extra wrappers that are empty. So, because what I get from the view full at the end is a render array, if I just check if cover title, it's a render array. Even though the representation of that render array is nothing, it is still an array. So the test will pass. So how do I prevent that, or how do I work around that? I call the render function, and by calling the render function, I am sure that if the field is empty, then I get an empty string and the test failed. So that is why you need the render function in one case and not in the other one. In the other one, Twig automatically will detect that this is a render array, and it will print the variable. It will call the render function automatically. So you will mostly need the render filter when doing tests. Like if something, then I apply the render to the variable, the render filter to the variable. Second recipe, how can I create and assign classes directly in the theme in the Twig template? Before in Drupal 7 we had a hook to do that. In Drupal 8 the recommended way to create classes is doing them directly in the template. So you just modify the template itself, you use the set keyword to create a variable, you assign the value that you need, and print a variable. Usually, when you are working with classes, you add them using the add class method. So this is an example. Again, we have seen this before. In this is the node template. The node template has a variable called attributes. That variable called attribute is an object, and that object has the method called add class. You can pass an array to it or a string to it, and it will add the classes that you decided. Again, we can use concatenations, we can use operators to modify what is going to be added as part of the classes themselves.
Is this the way that you would apply them style class names?
If you if you're going that route, you will basically have to rewrite the whole markup. So one thing that you can do is like your theme can actually add the BEM classes directly. So that brings about an important topic. These recipes, what allows you is to use user intent content in your template. If you already know that you want to use the BEM syntax, then you can use it directly. You don't need to do this kind of stuff. But for example, node bundle, anyone can name a bundle whatever they want. Or view mode, anyone can name a view mode whatever they want. So the recipes are for user entered content. So for user entered content, I want to use that in my template. If you already know by default that you want to use that specific class, you just like in line number 3, you just put the name of the class and that's it. This is mostly to work with user intent content.
I have a question. I feel like now seven is the best practice if you do all your kind of logic and process function. But it looks here like kind of
Reversing.
some logic here. I mean, is there a best practice for that?
You are supposed to do your business logic in pre-process. This only applies for classes. So in Drupal 8, you are supposed to create the classes in the template themselves, but everything else you do it in the backend. So you will continue doing your logic like in the first example, when I pass variable from the backend to the frontend, I do that in the backend in a pre-process function. This only applies for classes.
Okay. So like a page template file on a Twig file can get
Yeah.
a lot of sections in there.
Yeah. But the idea, again, we're trying to focus on the themer. So the themer will be able to know what are all the options directly by looking at this file and not by looking at this, random file in the PHP that I don't know how it's named or why it follows this convention. So the idea is for classes in particular, just to do it in the template itself. Everything else, any other logic you do in the backend. Recipe number 3, again, this is about user intent content. How can I render image fields as background images? So step 1 is not strictly required, but that module image URL formatter will help you a lot. And then I have screenshots for the other two. You configure the image field to use the image URL format provided by the module in step 1, and link to nothing and render the variable. So how do we do this? This is the manage display section of my content type. I have my image field, in this case called horizontal image. I say hide the label. I don't want to show the label. And when I enable that module, I get a format settings. I use image URL. I say URL type, full URL. I can get to choose the image style that I want, and I say link to nothing. Well, applying that configuration, then I can do the following. Section, the markup, whatever I want, and to use it as a background image, style equal background image URL, spaceless, the name of the variable, and spaceless. I want to focus on line number 2. Why do I need those spaceless things there? The reason is because Drupal, for some reason, I think it is too generous, it gives you white space around the markup. So if you print a variable, you will get white space around it. If you are, in a regular HTML context, the browser will, all that extra white space will collapse it to one space or to nothing, depending on the case. But here, we're trying to use this user intent content as a CSS attribute. So we don't need those extra spaces. In fact, if we have those extra spaces, it will break. So the spaceless filter will remove those. And that is why we need that thing there. Fourth recipe. How can I render node content as HTML attributes? Let's say that we have a file field that stores an SVG image. So how do we do it? We go again to the display settings. We say to hide the label and to to render the file as a URL to the file itself. And I just again use the spaceless to remove any white space that can come with the output, and I can use it directly as an HTML attribute. One thing here about security. SVG files and in general image files cannot always be trusted if you give the power to the user to enter whatever they want. In this particular case, it was a small site. All the assets were prepared by a designer who they trust, so we can directly output that. If you are like opening something like this for anyone, let's say for anonymous users even, you will need to do some checks to verify that you're not outputting anything dangerous. But the recipe itself is as simple as this one. You just, hide a label, render the file as a URL, use the spaceless filter, and you can use it as an attribute in an image tag. Another example, if I have an entity reference field and I want to link to that reference entity. So the way you do it is feature content in this case is an entity reference field. I say that I want to hide a label, and in the format settings, I select label and link label to reference entity. In addition to that, I need to create a new template, and we can use the theme debug to determine this. It can be as general or as specific as you want. In this case, I very specific about the entity type, about the field name, about the view mode that's being used. But this can be as simple as field -- field feature content. We can remove the node and the feature. The node to the left is the entity type, and the feature at the right is the view mode. So I could remove that if I wanted. In any case, what you do is you modify that template to look like this. I want to print only the URL. And again, we require the square brackets because we are working with render arrays, and the hashtag doesn't work if right after the dot. So we do that, and once we do that, we can just render the variable, and it will be a link to it will be a URL to the entity reference. Again, every time that you want to use user intent content as HTML attributes, you will need to use the spaceless filter to remove any white space that Drupal can provide. How can I conditionally render fields based on the content of other fields? This one is a little bit funny. So let's say that we have a Boolean field. And what we have to do? For one, we have to hide the label, and in the format, we have to say output format 1/0. I'm going to explain that later. So this is how you do it. You need to create, the reason why we create a variable is that if because we might want to use that in many ways or more than once in the template, what we do later. But here we're doing the following. Content.field lightbox is the variable that I am printing. I call the render and I call trim. Why do I call render and trim? Again, as we said before, if you are doing a test, and even though the field is empty because you get a render array, you need to call render. Why do we use in this setting 1 or 0? Because the default is going to use text. So for example, if you configure the label, when you configure a Boolean field, you say true value and false value, and you can add text. So you can say true value, please show the lightbox. False value, please don't show the lightbox. Both of those things are strings and are valid strings. And when you try to make a test using them, Twig is not smart enough to interpret what you're saying with those words. It will only check, is this a string? It has one or more characters? Yes. Because of that, it will evaluate to true always, even though you are actually not trying to print that. So that's why the 1/0 is important here. And why do we need a trim at the end? Again, when you render something, Drupal will put white space before and after. So if you have white space, 0, white space, that is a valid string. So that again will evaluate to true. So when using the trim filter, we remove the white space around, and then you actually get either 0 or 1. And then you can use that in the if statement, line number 2. So if 1 evaluates to true, if 0 evaluates to false. So you need 3 things. Render call the render filter to render the array, configure the output format to 1, 0, and call the trim function. And with that, you can actually use it as a test. 6. How can I use Twig filters to format numbers? So there is a filter called number format, and again, filters can have parameters or not. And if you don't provide any, it will use the defaults. So if you don't provide any parameter, it will filter the number to not use any decimal, to use a period as the decimal point separator, and a comma as a thousand separator. This might be relevant, for example, if you're targeting different audience, like the format number that we use in America is different that we use in Europe. So, you can tweak that. So this one came about 2 weeks ago. So how do I create an absolute link to a node? So the way that it works is as follows. You need to call the URL function. For some reason, the URL function expects you to have to pass a route to it. Does anyone know what a route is? Kathy knows. Okay. If you are a front-end developer, it is pretty likely that you don't know what a route is, and you are supposed to know what a route is. The way it works like this is because we are inheriting a lot of things from Symfony, and this actually comes from Symfony. That is how Symfony works. So, like someone asking for support, and I just sent, this is the way to do it. Now, let me explain it. The URL function expects at least one parameter. The first parameter is the route name. In this case, entity node canonical. That will translate to node/node 1, for example. Then you need to pass the node ID as a second parameter, and in this case, the second parameter is actually an array of different options. There are some cases where the second parameter is a full render array for other functions, but in this case, I just say to call this function with this first parameter, and the second parameter is an array with a key called node and a value called node.id. Node.id is something that I get from the node template. And then that is going to be the link, and as the text of the link, I want to be something pipe T. Pipe T will make sure that this gets the multilingual feature from core. So if you translate that text and a visitor is viewing the site in Spanish and a translation is available, that text is going to be translated. Now, because front-end developers don't need to know about routes, Drupal console is your friend. Again, that is mostly target for developers, but if you don't have any other options, just follow this. You call the router colon debug command. You grab whatever you're trying to find. In this case, internally, all the nodes are in a route called /node/node ID. So I grab through that, and I will get output for the view page, for the edit page, for the delete page. Based on the output, I can guess that the one that I need is entity.node.canonical. If I pass that as a parameter to router debug, then I can find out what is supposed to go in the second parameter. So this is really weird. This shouldn't be the case, but this is how Drupal works today. So we have sprints tomorrow. If you want to make this better, you're welcome. Now, those are the recipes that I have. If you want to learn more, I highly recommend this session from DrupalCorn Barcelona last year, Mastering Twig. Javier Aguiluz is one of the big guys in Symfony, and he has written books on Symfony and so on. The point is that in this session, he says, Drupal, you're doing it wrong, and he gives you how to do it right. And if you want to learn more about Drupal themes in general, there is this other session from Twin Cities 2 months ago. The recording is available. If you need support, for the old guys like me, you can use IRC, pound Drupal-twig at freenode.net. And if you're younger than me and you want to use a Slack, then drupaltwig.slack.herokuapp.com. You put your address and you will get into a Slack channel. Actually, the last recipe was something asked about it in Slack. I just helped them, and I thought it would be useful to have it here. And that's all that I have. Thank you. I would love to hear your feedback, so please give any if you think it's worth it. And I'm open to questions. Cool. Well, if there are no questions, thank you very much for your time. Hope you enjoy the rest of the camp.